I'm Donnie, 43 years old, and I've waited 2 decades for the silent click of iron cuffs to finish a story that began in a college bedroom. Back then I was 21, one semester from graduating with a communications major nobody on campus considered serious science. My boyfriend, let's call him Mason, was 26, halfway through his doctorate in animal biology, already deep into the world of academic research at a state university 9 hours from my hometown. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and brilliant in a way that drew people like moths to a lab bench lamp. I thought he was fascinating. He thought I was. Well, we'll get to that. Mason rented a peeling green house on Birch Street with 2 roommates, Alex and Noah, both fellow grad students. Weekends I'd throw a duffel in my rattling Corolla, drive the interstate, and spend 48 hours living on boxed mac and cheese, cans of DR pepper, and whatever scraps of conversation Mason could spare between TA duties and late-night animal feedings. The house smelled like cedar shavings, heat lamps, and dreams of tenure. I loved it. Money was tight. Mason's stipend paid rent. I worked retail back home, so Friday nights were tacos, not restaurants. But I didn't mind. I was in love with potential, with star charts sketched on pizza boxes, with the promise that one day his name would appear on the cover of Nature and mine would be scribbled inside the dedication. I learned Latin species names just to keep pace, practiced pipetting in the basement so I could help sex lab mice. I thought we were partners. Then came the comment. We'd just, reconnected after 3 weeks apart. I lay there catching my breath when Mason rolled onto an elbow, traced my hip, and said, "You're getting soft, Donnie. Hard to stay. Enthusiastic when you're packing on weight." The bedside clock glowed 1:03. The winter rain ticked at the window. I pulled the sheet to my chest, adrenaline burning cold as the words settled. 10 pounds maybe. I still wore the same size 8 jeans. My blood roared, but my voice stayed level. Got a solution in mind? He shrugged. Maybe cut carbs? I need to be attracted to you. I slid from bed, tugged on leggings, and stared him down. Then pick up groceries that aren't crackers and spray cheese. I'm fine. Fix your perspective. I crawled back under the quilt, turned away, and let silence be my closing argument. 3 months later, my phone rang during a lunch shift. Mason's voice was clinical. "We should break up. You don't know enough about science." I laughed. "Try again." That's the reason. Click. A month after that, he showed up at my apartment to return a hoodie. Under the hallway fluorescence, I demanded truth. Mason sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and admitted he'd been seeing Lily, a 19-year-old freshman from his Intro to Vertebrates lab. He was still her TA. I shoved the door. My roommate threatened to dump him over the balcony, and he fled down the stairs like a raccoon caught in kitchen light. Anger burned off fast, replaced by something cleaner: focus. The next morning I emailed Alex and Noah. This was the early 2000s. Email carried news nobody wanted to speak aloud. I thanked them for their kindness, told them Mason had ended things, said no hard feelings. Their reply shocked me. They already knew about Lily and had warned Mason to confess. Noah added a PS. "If you ever need to grab your stuff, we've got your back." Opportunity knocked. I arranged a retrieval weekend. Alex met me at the door, winked, and ushered me inside while Mason and Lily were off studying. We boxed my books, my spare sneakers, my favorite coffee mug, and while Alex sorted DVDs, I toured the makeshift menagerie in the basement. See, Mason wasn't just breeding legal lab mice. He fancied himself a boutique supplier. Exotic reptiles, endangered marsupials, and one very illegal South American kinkajou he'd rescued from a shady importer. He refused to register it or pay the $25 wildlife permit fee because the government doesn't own my science. I snapped Polaroids of every tank, tag, and heat lamp, including the forbidden kinkajou visible through the basement window from the street. Evidence. That night Alex and I hit every bar on Birch Street. We laughed. We danced. We let rumors breathe oxygen. At midnight we stumbled back. He slung an arm around my waist as we crossed the living room carpet where Mason and Lily sat watching TV. My dress was too short, my grin too wide. Alex's boxers peeked above his waistband as he fetched water. We were juvenile, petty, and absolutely unforgettable. When I left the next morning, Mason hissed, "No need to act like a slut." I bit into a powdered donut and purred, "Enjoy." The leftovers, lipstick smearing the sugar. Then I drove away, windows down, screaming Bonnie Raitt to the clouds. But that was just the appetizer. Monday, I developed the film and dialed state fish and wildlife. I asked how to report an unlicensed endangered mammal in a private residence. The officer thanked me for my civic duty and could I mail photographs? Certainly. I included a polite cover letter. Meanwhile, Alex and Noah filed complaints with the university. Teaching assistant sleeping with current student, grade favoritism, ethical violations. On Friday, they hosted a party and repeated the story to anyone holding a solo cup. Small program, fast gossip. Mason's reputation cracked. 2 weeks later, Alex called, voice buzzing with glee. Wildlife officers had arrived with a warrant, seized every illegal creature, and cited Mason under the Endangered Species Act. Lily, present during the raid, told officers she assumed everything was legal. The press release found its way to the departmental bulletin board by morning. But the real blow came from Washington, D.C. Mason's prestigious research work wasn't cheap and his ego had recently secured a massive federal grant worth nearly $300,000 for a long-term pollutant exposure study. But grants come with ethics clauses. One anonymous phone tip mine alerted the EPA that the lead researcher was already under state investigation for harboring illegal wildlife. The funding? Immediately frozen. Mason owed repayment on spent funds, roughly $30,000, and was deemed ineligible for future federal grants. The university yanked his teaching stipend, revoked his scholarship, and offered him a terminal master's degree if he left quietly. He left, master's in hand, reputation in shards, animals gone, fine of $15,000 hanging over his head. I stepped back, folded the chapter, and moved on. Or so I thought. Life surprised me. I earned a master's in irony alert science communication, translating complex research into language everyday people grasp. I traveled, consulted for museums, filmed documentaries, wrote grant proposals. I got paid to bridge the gap Mason once weaponized against me. I kept sporadic contact with his sisters, who'd become genuine friends. They married, invited me to weddings. I mailed gifts. Mason apparently married Lily, fathered to kids, and returned to breeding exotic reptiles in a suburban garage. The universe hummed along. Last October, a university in Oregon invited me to guest lecture on storytelling in public health. 250 students, bright lights, a stage I'd earned. Afterward, amid the selfie scrum, a voice said, "Donnie? Long time." I turned. The hair was thinner, the eyes more desperate, but it was Mason. Instinct told me to play dumb. "Have we met at another conference?" He blanched. "It's me, Mason." I widened my eyes as if a dusty file cabinet clicked open. "Oh, right. Hi." No hug, no warmth. I slipped away to sign programs. That evening, department faculty took me to dinner. Over dessert, the chair asked, "So you know Mason? We're considering him for a faculty spot, great grant writing record." I choked on Carmi Brilli. "Teaching? After what happened at University X?" Forks paused. "What happened?" I sipped water, choosing words like scalpels. He was sleeping with a 19-year-old student he was supposed to be supervising. Lost his research funding and left the university after a formal investigation. Their expressions shifted from polite interest to crisis calculus. I added, softly, "You might also check state wildlife records from 2003. Illegal exotics case." Then I changed the subject to climate communication. 3 days later, my mentor Claire, wife of Mason's former advisor and newly retired, phoned. Background investigators had pulled Mason's dusty file, dismissal letters, complaints, the old arrest docket. Someone, not me, technically had faxed it to the hiring committee. The offer rescinded. Mason, sensing sabotage, started digging. But he'd never find fingerprints. Knowledge travels on whispers. Apparently, that setback drove him to a shortcut. Within months, he partnered with a biotech startup promising revolutionary animal-safe pesticides. They courted investors, claimed preliminary data, flaunted Mason's 2 decades of grant experience. Investors wired $300,000 into an escrow account pending EPA certification. Mason forged documents, repurposed photos, and spent the money before the paperwork cleared. An auditing intern spotted mismatched file metadata, and the complaint escalated to federal investigators. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, grant fraud, violation of the Lacey Act, charges layered like sediment. Fraud pattern reference. The FBI traced the shell accounts, interviewed former colleagues including, eventually, me. I provided the 2003 case files and emails Mason once sent boasting, About knowing how to dance around bureaucrats, old sins corroborated new ones. The agents thanked me and warned, "You may hear from his lawyers, but truth is a shield." Last month, Dawn spilled pink over my kitchen when Claire texted a local news clip. FBI raid in suburb. I tapped play. Agents in windbreakers marched Mason, hands zip-tied, down his driveway past terrariums stacked like guilt in the garage. The reporter cited a $300,000 federal grant scam involving falsified research and endangered reptiles reappearing in interstate trade. I set my coffee down and breathed out 20 years of tension. Moments later, my phone pinged again, an unknown number. Voicemail transcription. "Donnie, it's Mason. I know you're behind this. You ruined my life." I deleted it without listening. Legally, Mason faces up to 10 years. Realistically, plea bargains will carve the sentence, but felony fraud sticks like tar. Lily filed for separation the day after the raid. Their children, I hear, stay with her parents. The house, financed on shaky subprime loans, sits under federal lien. Me? I'm writing a keynote on ethical storytelling, packing for a conference in Lisbon, slipping into size 10 jeans that hug decades of experience. I keep a letter taped above my desk from a Navy wife whose home was saved after I quietly shared Mason's modus operandi with an ethics board. It reads, "You don't know me, but you stopped a predator before he reached us." On brutal days, I touch that paper and remember justice moves on a long fuse. People ask if revenge satisfies. I say it deters. Fireflies need darkness to glow. Predators need shadows to hunt. Shine enough light, and you don't just avenge the past, you safeguard the next unsuspecting soul. So when someone calls you fat at a M, remember, that insult might be the first domino in a masterpiece of consequences. And you never know who will be there, 2 decades later, holding the flashlight while the cuffs click shut.